Hello, Tigers. I'm Dr. B, Dean of General Education, and today we have a very special episode of Tiger Talks featuring Dr. Scott Wilson, Salem University Professor of History and Government. Dr. Wilson is an accomplished and knowledgeable expert on governmental relations and history. His academic accomplishments include undergraduate and graduate degrees from West Virginia University and doctoral work at Louisiana State University, as well as Atlantic International University. Dr. Wilson has also studied Russian at Moscow State University and completed the Graduate Summer Institute in Political Psychology at Ohio State University. Today, Dr. Wilson joins us to lend his expertise and insight on governmental relations and non governmental organizations. Dr. Wilson, welcome to Tiger Talks.
Dr. B, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so happy to be here with you today and also to share this information that might be of a great interest to our students.
Absolutely, and we're really excited to talk to you today. So, again, thank you very much for taking some time to lend your expertise, which I know we'll all find very helpful. We'll get right into it. We know that you have a very extensive educational and practical background in politics, government, and how organizations interact with those institutions. We often hear those types of organizations is explained or termed as NGOs. For a lay person like me off the street, what is an NGO?
That's a good question, Dr. B. I've heard a lot about NGOs as well my whole life, but I never actually really knew what it was. I knew it was a non-governmental organization, but in practical terms, I never really knew. So I just have a couple of points here about basic points about what an NGO is. An NGO, first of all, is a non-governmental organization. It operates independent of any governmental body. It's typically a non-profit entity, although it does receive at times government funding. NGOs are typically created to address a certain social or political issue that's pressing in that particular region. Public opinion survey polls suggest that NGOs enjoy a wide popularity support in really all regions of the country. That's one of the reasons why various stakeholders take advantage of these NGOs and use them as proxies to achieve a certain objective in that region of the world that they want to work in. NGOs are typically divided into orientation and level of operation. Orientation can be why they're created. Maybe it's a social issue, a human rights issue, an environmental issue, a health issue. The level of organization is important too. It could be very local, it could be state, it could be regional, or NGO can operate at an international level. Now, lastly, there are a lot of NGOs in the world. Dr. B, did you know that there are over 10 million NGOs in the world? In India alone, there's more than 2 million NGOs. In the United States, there's more than 1.5 million NGOs. Now, some countries have less level of open civic dialogue, such as Russia, but still, even in Russia that clamps down on civil participation in society, there's over 200,000 NGOs there. So there's a lot of NGOs in the world today.
That is a lot of organizations to be out there. That's a great segue, though, to my next question. And that would be, is there an example maybe of one, an NGO that maybe we would be familiar with that we don't really think about, or maybe one that we should like check out and maybe they would be like the model NGO for us to kind of explore if that's something that we wanted to do?
That's a really good question. There's probably so many different types of NGOs, whether one is good or bad or serves as a model. It kind of goes in the eyes of the beholder. So that NGO is probably, they're going to say they're doing it right on track. NGOs have to justify their work in order to secure more donors. So probably the real test of NGOs would be to not really so much just go by what the NGO says, but to be look at the end result, the byproduct, and see what the actual impact of the NGOs are, of who they're touching. That's probably going to be the best best determinant. But yeah, there are some incredible NGOs, and I'm really glad that we're having this discussion because in the end, I am going to point out that I think our students, especially our international students that come here that speak multiple languages, NGOs are a great place of potential future employment for them, and I think it's something that they should consider.
And I guess that this is kind of a sidebar to that, but that's a good point. And I would imagine that there would be a lot of different roles within an NGO that an individual could maybe identify or be employed in, right? It wouldn't just need to be someone who's a political scientist. I imagine they need human resources people and business people, and depending on the area, maybe health
Yeah,
individuals or
and,
things
yes,
like that.
in fact, a political science probably would be low on the totem pole as what they need. They actually need people that do things. Political scientists they'll put in the office in DC, but the actual people in the field will be the people that are very good, people in health, people who can do health, people in construction management, people that can do structure management, people that can be advocates for people who typically aren't represented well in different societies. There's a role for everything, whether it's in the field, whether it's in the office. And that's a really good point. It's not a certain degree that you need. It's probably just more of a willingness to get in and help. But also, these are huge NGOs with huge budgets. So probably there's one there that's going to have a need for a specific skill and training that you have.
That's great insight, and thank you for sharing that with us. As we continue our conversation, I know before we started recording today, we were talking about some of your travels a little bit offline, and that segues into our next area. I know that as part of that travel, you had the opportunity to travel internationally, even during this COVID time and with all the craziness going on here in the world. And in your travels, I know that specifically you had the opportunity to discuss the roles of NGOs in other countries. What was that experience like?
Dr. B, it was absolutely fabulous. Being able to discuss NGOs with people in Guatemala where it's really impacting them, as well also to share it with my students in a Zoom meeting was absolutely incredible. Yeah, in September I went to Guatemala on a fact-finding mission. It was a mission to learn more about the role that NGOs play in civil society in Guatemala. To start with, why I became interested in this topic, back in 2016, I worked on my dissertation project in Guatemala. At the time, around 2016, that's when the first migrant waves were starting to come to the United States. And the mainstream media was telling us, oh, they're coming for political persecution. Well, I was kind of very skeptical of this. And at the time, my dissertation project was coming up. So for my project, I decided to do a very in-depth study in Guatemala City to find out why people are coming here. It was a pretty big project. We had 100 interviews, about 1 hour each. So that was a lot of time with a lot of people in Guatemala. In short, the survey concluded that, in fact, people are coming here for economic reasons. Now, there may be some political persecution, but sure, there's political turmoil. There's political turmoil here in the United States. It's pretty much the equivalent. So people, what I found though, were coming for economic reasons. Sure, there might have been some political issues, but it was always a secondary issue. It was never a primary issue. In the process of making my investigation and talking to different people down there in Guatemala, I ended up going to a lot of different political meetings. And one meeting I went to in particular, it turned out to be, if you will, a victims meeting. It was a victims meeting of what they said. They were victims of the international organizations and NGOs, international NGOs. This meeting was very compelling to me. And I saw grown men crying when they were describing the abuses they were having by NGOs. Now, this was a complete shock to me. This was 2016. I completed all my dissertation classes. I was working on my dissertation. I was a college professor. Yet I had no idea all this was taking place at NGOs. So once COVID restrictions came to an end, I really wanted to go to Guatemala to explore this issue a little further. Actually, to be honest, I wanted to go to see if there was enough material that I can write a book about this issue. So it was a fact-finding trip to interview people in Guatemala to find out about this NGO abuse, if it really did in fact happen, and to also perhaps lay the foundation for a book, which is something that I really wanted to do. I had a lot of meetings and I went to different places and it was really fascinating. But I think the best meeting I had was the one I had a Zoom meeting with the students. In this meeting, I had an attorney, a civil advocate come to my Airbnb, and we sat down next to each other. We had a great Zoom with the students, and it was really fascinating. This Guatemalan attorney and public advocate made a compelling case that Guatemala would be better off if it received $0, zero, from the international community as compared to what it's receiving now. Now he did say, oh yeah, Guatemala's broke. We need bridges, we need schools, we need hospitals, we need streets. But what's happening is that the money that we're receiving right now from the international community is actually it's making economic development harder, and it's hurting specific areas, and actually it's causing people to leave our country. That's why we'd be better off receiving no money. So that was really it was interesting. The students had a lot of questions, of course, and so that's pretty much the nutshell. Yeah.
No, that's a great topic of conversation because I think, again, speaking from my own experience, I'm sure there's other students in here or that will watch this that are kind of similar that don't have a ton of knowledge about NGOs. But what we do know, or what we're led to believe, is that all of their impact is positive, right? Whether it's whatever organization it is, we'll use like UNICEF. I'm not sure if they're an NGO, but I would think that like along the same lines, right? Raising money to end hunger or things like that. But I guess I never really took, and I'm sure other folks don't really haven't taken the time to see that there could be negative impacts from there. That leads me, I guess, to my next question. Overall, is there a consensus about whether NGOs hurt or help the groups of people? And would that question maybe be better answered in a specific region, like in Guatemala, where maybe it's not as helpful, but maybe somewhere in the US where an NGO might have more benefit? How based on your experience and your expertise, can you comment on that at all?
Sure, absolutely. I think there is an answer, is whether NGOs are doing their job or not doing their job. But it depends on a couple of things. It depends on if you're in the know, if you have a awareness of this issue. And what I found, and even in Guatemala, was that very few people actually in civic society really knew that this debate was even taking place. For example, when I went down this time, I brought my bicycle, and I did a lot of bicycle riding, and I made a lot of friends on bicycle. And one time after a bicycle ride, group of us went to get some coffee. There were 7 people there. It just so happened to be me and 7 attorneys. I had no idea they were attorneys. 7 attorneys who should be in the know about these types of issues. Well, as it turned out, none of them did. None of them were really aware of the NGO issue while I was there. None of them were, and of course, they followed politics and so forth, but it was kind of baffling. Their general impression was that we need money, we need support, but is there something negative about it? They were kind of in the know. So my answer to you is there is an answer, but that's if you're in the know. And then if you're in the know, it all depends on what side of the fence you sit. There's going to be 2 perspectives. Yes, NGOs are good, or NGOs are bad. And what I found that in Guatemala, there is a literal ideological war taking place over the NGOs. And the debate, it goes something like this. On the one hand, NGOs say they are helping the people that need it the most. But on the other hand, there's critics that are going to say NGOs are purposely keeping poor communities down in order to justify the continued existence of these NGOs. So that's pretty much the debate. Now, okay, this is all theory, but what about examples? whenever I talk to somebody down there who's in the know, they're going to always go to what's happening with hydroelectric plants in Guatemala. They always talk about the protests that the NGOs led in rural parts of Guatemala against the hydroelectric plants, as well as they protested mines, and there was also some farm evasions taking place. These all took place in rural, poor communities. For background information, just a few years ago, Guatemala had 31 hydroelectric power plants. It was the largest energy exporter in all of Guatemala. But due to various conflicts that people would argue were led by NGOs, 16 of these projects were canceled. This represents billions of dollars in investment in rural communities in Guatemala. And in some cases, the plants themselves were attacked, and in other cases, machines were literally burned. Now, the closing of the mines and the plants in the community isn't just the closing of that mine or that plant. It's also the supporting companies. It's the hundreds of supporting companies that pretty much support that mine or that plant in that rural community where nothing else is going on. So when 16 of those mines or plants were closed in rural and poor communities, I mean, I don't have any statistics on that, but we can pretty much be rest assured if nothing much else is going on, a lot of those people came here or they're planning to coming here. It's pretty much how it goes. You're economic depressed, and if you're a rational actor, you're going to go to where the jobs are. Now, from the perspective of the NGOs, now this type of conversation, actually, what you need somebody anti, you need somebody pro right here. But without that, I can just try my best to cover what they might say. An NGO perspective or say, look, mining is causing earthquakes. We need environmental protection. That's a big one. They bring up earthquakes, and they've had earthquakes down there. Then they're going to say, we have the rights of minorities, especially indigenous people. These rights have to be defended. Then they're going to say, okay, we need equity in pay. No more of this treating indigenous people like, livestock. No, we need equity in pay. And also we need equity in employment. No, if you're coming here with outside investments, you are going to employ the locals. That's what an NGO is going to make the case. Now, and the argument about NGOs has now kind of left the field, and it's now entered the court system. The legislature, the governing body of Guatemala, and the Supreme Court of Guatemala have now gotten their hands on this issue. In May of this year, the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court in Guatemala, the equivalent of the Supreme Court, they approved a controversial law that identified or clarified how NGOs operate in Guatemala. The new law requires any NGO in Guatemala to go through an extensive vetting and registration process. What's questionable or controversial is that it requires each NGO to maintain detailed financial records that are subject to the supervision of the Comptroller of Guatemala at any time. Okay, so before this law took effect, NGOs did not have to maintain their records. The previous highest court from last year said, no, this law is unconstitutional, but they had new members came in, new members more ideologically, I guess you could say conservative. So they said, no, this law is going to be in effect. So as you can see, there's some constitutional issues here. An NGO with money from abroad does work in Guatemala, but yet they have to open up their books to the government of Guatemala. So far, that's what the government has ruled. Now, actually, here's something interesting. This past October, just 2 months ago, there was a massive demonstration protest in Guatemala City. They were protesting the President Jean Matte, who is ideological on the conservative side in Guatemala. They were protesting him, and they did a statue. They tore down statues. Christopher Columbus, he's not just a target here. He was they got him down there in Guatemala City, and they took down statues of other previous presidents in Guatemala. So it was a demonstration that got ugly. Now, people observed this protest, and they did find one NGO in particular, Aco Guate, that was prominent in this investigation. So they looked at Aco Guate, and they found money that it received money from the Swedish Fellowship of Reconciliation. They looked at that, and they found that that received money from the Swedish Corporation of Development. They looked at that, and they found that that received money from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. And then they looked at that, and they found out their money comes from the Swedish government. So this just goes to show that a money trail is important, especially if they think NGOs are doing the wrong type of things. If they believe with this money trail, looking at books, they can see where this violence is coming from. But again, it does bring up constitutional issues about privacy and records. But so far, right now in Guatemala, pretty much if you're an NGO, you're operating by an open book policy. Now, in Guatemala, they do switch out their Supreme Court justices quite a bit, a lot more than we do. So maybe the next one may be more liberal leaning. So maybe that may change. But for right now, that's what they're doing. They're looking at the funding operations of these NGOs.
Well, that was a great explanation. I feel like I'm much more knowledgeable now, and I can understand why this would be such a hot debate, because I feel like, maybe to relate it in this country, I feel like a lot of the same kind of conversations are around lobbying, right, in Congress, and of similar, like, where's the money going and where's the money coming from, and who's really interests are being served here. So I can see that kind of those parallels.
It's so funny. That's the exact same thing. It's the
parallel. No, it's really cool to see that come
Yeah.
out in your conversations and your expertise. So thank you for that great explanation. So, students in this class, other classes at Salem, how can they better utilize this new understanding of NGOs now?
I think that's really, it's a good question. I think this understanding of NGOs is really important. Like I said, Dr. B, a couple years ago, I was a PhD candidate, taught classes, but I had no idea this was going on. I had no idea. I didn't know. I had no idea. I went to meetings. I was surprised. So I think that just students knowing about this, it makes them more informed about the world, which is, if you're more informed about the world, whatever the topic is, that's going to be, it'll be better off for you. It just makes you more enlightened. It brings out an awareness of things, which I think is really important. Also, as we talked about before, I still believe, even with all their warts, NGOs are a great place to work. And so the State Department too is a great place to work, even with the issues going on there. So our students that are interested in international types of careers, especially, like I said, our international students that know multiple languages and know how to live in other countries, NGOs are a perfect place for them to look. And if these students are aware of what's going on with NGOs at the end level, that's going to make them do their jobs better. It's going to give them a step on their colleagues to understand that it's not just what happens in DC, it's what happens at the local level. It's important too. So if our students do pursue a career in international studies, they're going to be aware that the end product is just as important as what's being decided at conference tables in DC. And lastly, and this is something that I really want to emphasize to my students. As a professor, I want to emphasize to my students when they about the NGO issue, is that when they try to study or look at international affairs is different than looking at politics today. Politics today in the United States is Republicans versus Democrats, liberals versus conservatives. That pretty much almost stops at the water's edge, because what's going on right now in the world today is pretty much globalism versus nationalism, and pretty much all the big debates right now are taking place in globalism versus nationalism. As long as they think in terms of globalism and nationalism, that's probably going to help them better understand what's going on in the world today as compared to Republicans versus Democrats. So this debate about NGOs is smack dab in the middle of that globalism versus nationalism debate. If you're going to speak to a globalist and a nationalist, they're immediately going to have a position on this issue, and that's what I found down in Guatemala. Also, and Dr. B, I'm real excited. In January, I'm going to be doing another Zoom with this lady. She's from Nigeria, I believe. She's a public commentator, and it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a Zoom on the impact of NGOs in Africa, and she's going to give us the assessment of what's happening in Africa. Are people are being impacted positively? Are they being impacted negatively? So I'm really looking forward to that Zoom as well. It's almost the exact same thing as Guatemala, except we're just going to switch continents. We're going to go to Africa, and she's probably going to say the same thing as this gentleman, but it's just going to be a different context. So I think these types of Zooms where the students learn from other countries, and whatever perspective the students take, just having an awareness of these issues, it's really going to be good for our students. I wish I had these Tiger Talks when I was a student.
Same here.
You
This is
know,
yeah, no, this and that, and I think it's cool to be able to, see one of our great professors in yourself being able to, create this original research and these findings, and hopefully we'll get that book here sooner than later, and we'll be able to maybe use it as a resource in one of the classes or several of the classes. That would be ideal, for us. But this has been really an excellent chat, and great to see your insight and expertise here, Dr. Wilson, and especially as you mentioned before, how it fits within the context, of our global citizenship as students, as they examine world issues like this, as you mentioned. So thank you again, for taking the time to talk with us today about NGOs.
thank you so much, Dr. B. It was really a pleasure to sit here and discuss this important issue with you. I thank you for taking an interest in my research. And also congratulations to you and all you've done here at Salem University. And congratulations on Tiger Talk. Like I said, if I was a student, students here in a way, they're lucky. I never had these types of things. So I really appreciate you going out of your way to make these types of programs available for our students.
And we really appreciate our great faculty like yourself that has this expertise to offer. So thank you again for taking the time today. And thank you to our students for taking the time to join us and watch this special presentation of Tiger Talks. Until next time.